Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 9th of August. As always, we encourage you and your community to stay up to date and aware of the weather in your area simply by going to weather.gov/Alaska, listening to the forecast on Marine VHF or your NOAA weather radio, or giving us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. Of course, you can find information all day long on Facebook. You can find us at NWS Alaska and NWS Alaska on Twitter, as well as NWS Anchorage, NWS Juneau, and NWS Fairbanks. And use the hashtag AKwx. That's short for Alaska Weather. That lets us know that you want to talk about Alaska weather. Maybe you're sharing a beautiful picture of Denali, or perhaps what it's like up there around Kotzebue Sound. YouTube, you can find us on NWS Alaska. And after this show, if you go to youtube.com, type in AKwx TV, you'll find the complete broadcast there. That from our broadcast partners here at alaskapublic.org, and we thank them for their service there. Tonight's hazardous weather includes wind advisories. That'll go until midnight tonight for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, as well as the eastern Alaska Range. This will include Delta Junction and the areas along the Richardson Highway. You might see gusts upwards around 50 miles per hour or so. So if you're traveling in a high-profile vehicle, you might have to hold onto the wheel a little bit stronger, especially if that wind's blowing crossways over the highway there. So take it easy there and just plan ahead. Plan for a few gusts there that could be a little bit stronger than normal. So those wind advisories are expected to go until about midnight tonight. Other than that, the weather is pretty much status quo across Alaska. Let's look a little bit out across the Bering Sea and across the North Pacific. You can see the trail of moisture coming up out of the eastern Pacific. Several waves of low pressure working up toward the central and eastern chain. One of those a little bit more evident here, that spiraling shape working over the central and western chain of the Aleutians. Not a whole lot of moisture that's really built up, though, across the Bering Sea. Most of what we're seeing now is low clouds, stratus, fog, and we're still getting waves of cooler air trying to work into the northwestern coast. Another look at this shows that southerly flow working up across the central and eastern chain, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. As that continues working up across southwestern Alaska, a lot of that is working into a more unstable atmosphere. And for parts of south central, that's meant rain. Some of that has been working towards the central and eastern parts of the interior. And of course, southeastern Alaska getting their fair share as usual. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and you can really see the progression of this. Look at all the wealth of moisture working across southern and southwestern parts of Alaska. A little bit of a break for central and southern southeast earlier today, but a very well-defined southerly flow out ahead of that is working its way eastward. So in due time, you will get your return to rainfall. A few breaks in the clouds and the stratus there across the northern and western Bering. Here's our circulation we were just seeing on the Bering Sea satellite picture that's sloshing moisture back up into the central and western chain. And for our friends up north, a lot of this moisture is also working across the North Slope and the Brooks Range there. You can see some of that in a few of the passes that actually filled in all the way. As we get into the midweek there, it looks like a north and northwesterly flow will sweep a lot of that cloud cover out of here. So maybe as early as Tuesday, things will be improving there around Barrow and points eastward as we go through Wednesday and into Thursday as well. Here's a look at the weather map. Low pressure there sitting at 1,003 millibars just south and east of Homer was bringing in rainfall. A pretty soggy day for many along the Kenai Peninsula from Homer to Seward into Prince William Sound, the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys all the way up toward Willow and Houston and eastward toward Chickaloon. Everybody getting at least a little taste of the rainfall today. A frontal boundary sitting across the Brooks Range, kind of crossing it there right around the Highway and north and east. You can see that extends into the Beaufort Seacoast. We've got a weak circulation just north and west of Wainwright. That is bringing in a slightly drier air into Kotzebue Sound. We still have some showers on the west side. Wouldn't be surprised tomorrow in this area because of this boundary working eastward if we got to see a little bit more, chop, maybe in the morning, kind of leftover areas of turbulence there for anybody flying through the region. Out across the west, low clouds, a little bit of fog and drizzle across the Alaska Peninsula. And watch what happens as we head through tonight. Frontal boundary starts working eastward. That's going to squeeze more moisture north and east. And wouldn't be really surprised to see 1 or 2 areas of thunderstorm activity right along the eastern Alaska Range. And again, Delta Junction could be one of those spots on top of wind, though. So keep that in mind. As this works through, you'll start to get some drier weather around Kotzebue Sound, around the Seward Peninsula, around southwestern Alaska. And then for southeastern Alaska, here comes that wave of moisture we just saw in the satellite picture. That's going to work in from west to east and enhance the area of rainfall for you as we go ahead into Monday and Tuesday. Warmer air is lifting northward across the central and eastern chain, but it's not going to win. It looks like it's going to stay out across the Gulf. Meanwhile, the main disturbance across the mainland is trekking eastward slowly and surely. That's going to bring more rainfall further east as we go ahead in time and make any residual moisture across south central and southwest a little more showery with time for Tuesday. Drier air drops in across the Beaufort Seacoast at 1,011 millibars. Sure, it's a little bit cooler, but you'll get that drier northerly flow back in, and the clouds should break up just a little bit more. Another wave of low pressure, though, is just off to your west. And north of the Bering Strait, that drops to about 994 millibars, with high pressure dropping in across the central chain. Now across southeast, it's not really hard to figure out who had sunshine and who had rain today. And if you use the measure of temperature, that'll do the trick for you. The warmer it goes, the drier it was, of course. Mid-60s to about 70 degrees from Angoon all the way out toward Sitka, where temperatures start to cool off back into the mid-60s. A little bit further north and into the interior and the inner waterways, you see temps dropping into the 50s and 60s. Haines and Skagway managed to make it up into the upper 60s by early afternoon. 59 in Yakutat. Mid-50s around Prince William Sound, 50s and 60s for the Kenai Peninsula, and that is with rain, so it won't be too many days we can keep doing that. 62 degrees around Kodiak, 60s and 70s north of the Alaska Range toward Healy and Fort Greely, and 71 in Fairbanks, 76 for Eagle today, 70 at Fort Yukon. And if you look up around Anaktuvuk Pass, it dropped to 45, but really it's not too bad considering the Arctic coast temperatures were also in the lower to mid-50s. Atkasuk managed 50 today with Barrow at 46. Kotzebue Sound also in the lower 50s. Around the Seward Peninsula, mid-40s for most areas, 49 around Nome, 46 for Unalakleet, 59 for McGrath, 48 in Galena. About the same there as you head out toward Ruby and points south and west. You can see temps were a little bit closer to the lower to mid-50s, including Sparivon. 56 in Bethel today. And it looks like Lake Iliamna managed 54 degrees with Dillingham at 61, 56 for King Salmon, and 50s and 60s for most in the Alaska Peninsula today. Sandpoint was closer to 64, not too bad, and lower 50s for the Pribilofs with low to mid-50s for Attu, Shemya, Adak, and Atka all managed temperatures a little bit on the milder side. Now, overnight lows in the lower to mid-50s. You'll notice, so once you go west of where that disturbance is working from west to east, that boundary really represents a decent change with temperatures dropping into the lower 40s out across the Kuskokwim Valley and the lower Yukon Valley. So a little bit cooler out there. Mid-50s for southeast. The chain still holding at temperatures in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees. Nome down to 39, 37 in Barrow, and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast also in the upper 30s. Still above freezing, and high temps tomorrow only a little bit warmer for you. Upper 30s and lower 40s for many. The Seward Peninsula in the low to mid-50s there. Norton Sound temperatures closer to 52. Southwest, you might see another warm day around Bristol Bay, lower 60s. The Alaska Peninsula just shy of 60 in many locations. A few like False Pass or Cold Bay might sneak up on 60 degrees. 66 in Kodiak. Upper 50s, I should say, closer to 60 for many in southeast. Sitka about 58. Ketchikan and Annette, low 60s for you. South Central, probably low to mid-60s again. Prince William Sound just shy of 60, and around Glen Ellen and Gulkana closer to 60 degrees by the afternoon, mid-50s for the interior. IFR conditions are expected to increase across the southeastern outer coast. Prince William Sound, as well as many along the Alaska Range, will also get a taste of IFR, especially in the morning. And then the Brooks Range, also looking at IFR conditions generally in the morning. Just offshore the Bering Sea coast, expect IFR during the early morning hours, and then some of that will break up into MVFR as the day goes on. Your past conditions include Anaktuvik at IFR through most of the day. Do look for some improvement during the daytime. Same goes for Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see dramatic improvements during the daytime. So the first part of Monday, not so hot. Rainy Pass also expected to turn over toward MVFR conditions by the day as the day goes on, I should say. MVFR conditions for Windy Pass during the afternoon. Isabel Pass, we expect to see some improvements after starting out around IFR. Mentasta Pass should also lean over toward VFR conditions as your Monday afternoon continues. Tonita Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule by the end of the day, but again, conditions in the morning not so hot. Portage Pass may have some restrictions in the morning, but again, improvements, especially on the eastern side, are expected by late afternoon. And Chilkoot and White Pass might have a little more trouble during most of the day as more moisture is building into those regions. So it may not start horribly, but again, by the end of the day, you might be looking at a better chance for IFR and more spots there. Freezing levels show the colder air dropping in behind that trough of low pressure. That's working from west to east, so no surprise that colder air is coming in behind that. Those levels as low as 2,000 feet on the Chukchi Seacoast and as high as about 8 to 10,000 feet across the Alaska Peninsula. And you'll see freezing levels between about 10 to maybe 12,000 feet closer to the outer coast and between about 8 and 10,000 feet for parts of southeast. Icing potential generally above 7,000 feet along the Alcan border southeast. Not a huge issue just yet. For the west coast, about 7 to 8,000 feet there. Most of that is light to isolated moderate. Some of it still lingering along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and not across the central chain. That will be above 8,000 feet. Your jet stream shows low pressure across the Pacific Northwest. That's been keeping parts of southeast dry. But our main trough in the upper atmosphere that's guiding all this wet weather is still working its way eastward, and as it does so, we're still going to be fairly soggy and unsettled, especially across the interior, southern, central parts of Alaska and southwest until high pressure takes command once again. Low pressure at 9,000 feet shows winds coming in from the north and west around 15 to 20 knots. A gentle westerly breeze over the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit faster across the central chain, and our southwesterlies coming into the Panhandle are running around 15 to as high as 45 knots. They seem to slow on the brakes before we get to the Panhandle, though. The interior about 15 to 20 knots, about the same there at 3,000 feet. Our circulation across the eastern part of the Kenai Peninsula and Chugach shows wind speeds around 25 to 30 knots. Winds are still pretty light across southwest and pick up once again you get out to the Bering. And we have more of a northerly flow around Point Barrow dropping southward into the interior. Well, turbulence, we're going to watch that area in the morning again. I was pointing out on the surface charts right around the western Brooks Range into the Koyukuk Valley and probably the middle interior, about 7,000 feet and below 3,000 feet around the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And if you're flying in around St. Matthew to St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island below 5,000 feet, probably should expect at least a little bit of chop also across the southern tip of Kodiak Island and northward out of Haines and Skagway. Watch for a little chop there. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with a look at your sea ice edge and your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
The third priority is shelter. Your life raft protects you from the elements and provides you insulation. Keep it tidy. Use the baler to keep it dry.
Water was getting inside in the life raft. And that's one thing that was in the survival kit was a baler. We had to bale.
If you have 2 sponges, use one to mop up the salt water on the floor and the second sponge to recover some of the condensation which in cold climates will collect inside the canopy for drinking. Keep this second sponge only for fresh water. In poor weather, close all the openings to keep as warm and as dry as possible. Make sure the sea anchor, or drogue, has automatically deployed. The drogue is needed for stability and to keep you as close as possible to your last reported position. Adjust the length of line so that when you are on top of the wave, the drogue digs into the trough. There is a spare drogue in Solus A and B packs. If seas permit and you wish to travel further in the direction of wind and current, remove the drogue from the water. If you want to decrease your progress, redeploy it. The pump is used to keep the life raft fully inflated. The pump and valves in your raft may look and operate differently from those seen here. Inflatable floors do not inflate automatically. Find where to inflate the floor and inflate it. Even in tropical waters, you will want the floor inflated for insulation. Some floors do not inflate. They have built-in insulation.
Oh, I got one. What do you think this is for?
Well, let me see. I don't know. It's got threads on it.
Well, let me see here. Well, we know that this raft has pressure relief valves on the outside there, so I'm going to bet you it's a plug.
Rough seas may pound your life raft and cause air to be released through pressure relief valves outside the raft. Find the valve plugs in your pack and insert them if needed. Life raft repair packs vary from brand to brand. The metal clamps found in some brands work very well even in wet conditions. If your tear is small, you may need to cut it larger for the smallest clamp to work. Newly approved peel and stick patches are available for some types of raft material. Due to the water ballast pockets under the raft, you will find the paddles difficult for locomotion, but they can be used for navigating short distances.
Caleb, you're not looking too good there. Let me see if I can find something here to help you out in case you get sick. Here you go. Why don't you keep this nearby you?
All right.
Keep your shelter clean by using seasickness bags. Solus A and B packs have at least 2 thermal protective aids, or TPAs. In case additional thermal protection is needed, additional TPAs can be added during annual repacking. Your fourth priority is signals. On the radio, send a mayday. Take the EPIRB from your vessel, turn it on, tie it off, and leave it in the water. Even if you haven't turned it on, it will automatically activate and begin transmitting. EPIRBs are not a standard part of a Solus kit. Be sure to take it with you. Other signaling devices should be readily accessible to your lookout so they can be deployed quickly, as aircraft may be within sight for just a few seconds.
I saw the C-130. I figured we better try at least get a parachute flare off because he knew where we were. So I waited for him to take a bank towards us where his line of visibility would be down towards us at least give us the best chance of survival. And so I shot it.
Practice aiming your mirror by lining up your target in the notch between 2 fingers and shining the light in the notch. Mirrors will work even on cloudy days. Solus A and B packs contain smoke, handheld, and parachute flares. Ask your life raft repacker to explain how the flares in your raft operate. They may operate differently than the ones on your vessel. Different brands operate differently. Read the instructions on the flares before you need to operate them at night or in rough seas.
Hey, you guys, I got a parachute flare here. I'm going to shoot it just in case somebody's out there. I don't see anybody, but just in case.
In general, fire 1 parachute flare right away to alert rescuers who might be just over the horizon. Hold the rest until you can see vessels or planes. With the flare in your hand as shown, aim the flare at a 65 to 80 degree angle above the horizon. Turn your face away and fire. Do not fire at rescuers. Parachute flares shoot a projectile 1,000 feet. Be prepared for a kick like a firearm when firing. Handheld flares drip slag. Solus grade flares drip less slag than non-Solus flares. This is why only Solus flares are packed in life rafts. They should still be held well away from the raft, horizontal and downwind to avoid damaging the raft. Different handheld flares also have different firing mechanisms. Smoke is especially useful on calm days. Helicopter rescue pilots also find smoke useful to judge wind direction. The cans of smoke float, and due to the heat they produce, they should be tossed into the water well away from the raft. A copy of life-saving signals is included in Solus A and B packs. The whistle is 3 to 5 times louder than the human voice. The flashlight has an extra bulb and batteries. The life raft also has an external-internal dome light. It can be disconnected when not needed during the day. The canopy also has light-reflecting tape. Other items may be used as signaling devices. Use your imagination. The fifth priority, water, is only found in Solus A packs. 1.5 liters for each person the life raft is designed to carry. Water is essential for all body functions, including thinking and fine motor skills. You will probably already be dehydrated when you enter the life raft.
It wasn't long, about an hour into the raft, that we actually got thirsty, or some of us got thirsty, which was surprising, that quick. I said, geez, it'd be nice to have some water, and then it took me a second to recollect that there actually was water in the raft.
Despite information to the contrary, do not ration water for the first 24 hours. Drink as needed.
Hey, we better drink some of this water. You hold on to 2. Those are yours.
You need water to function efficiently before and during the rescue. Most rescues occur within 72 hours. Determine a way to distribute water fairly and equally. Use the graduated drinking vessel found in the Solus A pack. Use this or other containers to gather and store rainwater through the rainwater collection hose. Don't forget to collect your condensation from the inside of the roof, especially in cold climates. Water is usually packed in foil pouches, but Solus A packs are still required to have 3 tin can openers.
3 can openers. What could we use this for?
Well, you guys know I grabbed a can off the galley table on the way off the boat.
Can of food?
Quail eggs in brine.
Wow, those are mine. Right on, Caleb. Hey, let's open those up.
That's great. Let's eat on these.
That's
Good
awesome.
move.
Well, have either of you ever eaten quail eggs?
Not in a can.
Looks like a good time to start. Here's a look at sea ice edges, and you can see this anytime you want by going to the weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php page. A quick analysis today shows just north of Prudhoe Bay, the ice edge is about 15 nautical miles offshore. You go up to Barrow, it's about 25 nautical miles to the north and east. And the ice around the Hannah Shoal, almost gone. Not quite, but almost gone. Perhaps by the end of the day tomorrow, gone. So a lot of this is slowly melting in place. We're still watching with great interest the coastline from Kaktovik to Prudhoe Bay and then north and west to see how much more open this is going to be here in the coming days. So stay tuned, more to come. That's a look at the sea ice edge. You can always see that online anytime you like. Now in southeast, the wind's picking up a little bit there ahead of that next wave. Look for a stronger southeasterly flow, about 20 to 30 knots on the inside. 4 to 6 foot seas there, and looks like we'll see winds come up to gales there around 35 knots. 7 foot seas in the Lynn Canal, and onshore flow from the south and southwest on the outer coast, 20 to 25 knots. And then all areas look at diminishing winds, including the Lynn Canal. That drops to 25 knots with a 5 foot sea. 3 foot seas further south. Southerlies develop across the outer coast from 15 to 20 knots. Seas still holding around 7 feet to the west of the Dixon entrance on Tuesday. Heightened variable winds inside of Prince William Sound. Otherwise, a stronger westerly flow sweeping across the western and northern Gulf at 25 to 35 knots. Northerlies develop across the Cook Inlet and the northern regions there, about 10 knots or so by the end of tomorrow. And then as we get into Tuesday, that switches to more of a northeasterly flow, remaining light. Otherwise, northwesterlies for most of Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait. A very weak easterly flow outside of Resurrection Bay at 15 knots. A lighter easterly flow inside of Prince William Sound, and light and variable winds on the northern parts of the Gulf with a 6-foot sea there for Tuesday. North and westerly winds are expected inside of Bristol Bay, 20 knots with a 5-foot sea. Variable flow becomes westerly the further north you go along the Pacific coast, with 7-foot seas developing from Chignik to Castle Cape on Monday. By Tuesday, that northwesterly wind is back, 20 knots there with a 6-foot sea. Northwesterlies along the Bering Sea coast, 3 to 4-foot seas there on a 15-knot wind there for Tuesday. Light and variable winds are expected for the central and western Aleutians, about 10 knots there with 3 to 5-foot seas at most. North and westerly flow across the Bering Sea coast from Nikolsky to Unalaska, and a little bit more of a north and westerly wind at 10 to 15 knots there on the Pacific coast for Monday. As you get into Tuesday, you'll see southerlies returning in the west from Kiska to Attu, and westerly winds north of Unalaska. Otherwise, you're looking at winds around 15 to 20 knots in all areas, and seas holding from 3 to 4 feet in most places. 6-foot seas, though, on the Pacific coast from Atka to Unalaska. Across the west, a west and southwesterly wind in the northern Bering, around 25 knots or so, 5 to 7-foot seas. The higher you go, the further west you have to go. Northwesterly winds across the upper Kuskokwim, 15 knots with a 5-foot sea. Variable winds around the Pribilofs, holding at 10 with 4-foot seas there for Monday. More of a westerly flow develops from the Kuskokwim Bay all the way out toward the Pribilofs on Tuesday, and west and southwesterly winds continue up north with seas running around 6 to 8 feet. For the north coast, northerlies there as the next wave of low pressure moves through, 15 to 20 knots there along the Beaufort Sea coast with 4-foot seas north of Kaktovik, and a southwesterly flow outside of Kotzebue Sound at 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Tuesday, those winds are going to pick up across the Chukchi Sea coast. One reason some of that ice should break up, a south and southeasterly flow, 25 to 30 knots with seas as high as 7 feet, and light northwesterly winds north of Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse, easterly flow north of Barrow, and northwesterly winds pick up to 20 knots with a 4-foot sea around Kaktovik and Demarcation Point. That's a look at your marine forecast. A quick check of tonight's weather shows a surface wave working from west to east. That's pushing wet and possibly a few storms around Delta Junction, not to mention wind advisories for the eastern Alaska Range and Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Those gusts could reach up to 50 miles per hour or so and should end around midnight. Look for increasing wet weather across the northern and eastern Gulf with a wave of low pressure moving from west to east. That means more showery weather in south central and southwest and a chance for some light rain across the north. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.